First of all, welcome to the Developer Summit, and second of all, welcome to our session tonight, Administering Your Web GIS with the API for Python. So if you don't like administration, or you don't like API for Python, or if you don't like my colleagues Bill or Dave, you might be in the wrong place. Okay, so here I am presenting with my colleagues Bill, who's right here, and David, and we are all work on the API for Python team. And I'm going to go ahead and get started by first, I'm going to take a look at an empty ArcGIS enterprise. And what I'm going to do then is show you that I don't have any look or feel to my enterprise. I've got no groups. I have just a set of administrator users that were created on the install, and I don't have any content here. And I'm going to open my IDE, and I'm going to fire off a couple scripts. And then I'm going to go back to the slides and talk a little bit about it, and then we'll come back to the scripts, and I'll show you what these scripts are doing. And it looks like it is started, so I'm going to fire this other one off. And then head back to the slideshow. So there, I showed you the empty ArcGIS Enterprise, the fresh one after an install. What we're going to talk to you a little bit about today is the API for Python, administering your web GIS with it. We're going to focus on enterprise here, but there's things you can do in here with the ArcGIS Online too. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the basics of Python and why we use Python, and then I myself am going to talk about users, groups, and content, and walk through some scripts that automate the process of creating users and groups, assigning users to groups, and publishing some content from zip files. And then I'm going to turn it over to David and Bill and let them continue to wow you. Right? So Python, why Python? So Python is a high-flying language, right? People love it. You love it. We love it. Python is a very popular language, and there's a lot of talk there that you can get up and running pretty quickly with Python, even coming from somebody who doesn't have a development or computer science background. I can say I have been able to produce some things with Python. And there's another reason that Esri's adopted, so there's a huge scientific ecosystem that uses Python, and it's one of the reasons why we wrote the Python API and incorporate Python so deeply into our software. So the Python API, what it is it is an interface to your web GIS, right? So all the familiar geocoding and routing and GIS tools that you know and love are accessible to you through Python, and you can use it, designed to use against services in your web GIS. And then you can also manage your infrastructure and automate a whole set of tasks that way. The module is organized, or the site package is organized through modules. Right? There's these ones in blue are kind of fundamentally about processing data, and these ones in green down here are sort of the fundamental architecture of the data, like features and raster. And there's some visualization modules. And then there is the main entry point into the API, which is the GIS class. And the way you access this GIS class is with a simple import statement like that from ArcGIS.gis import GIS. This imports the GIS class and models your enterprise system in this class. You can authenticate with all different kinds of authentication schemes, and one of the tricks of authenticating is you can set up a profile on your system where you define a profile when you log in, and then that will store your credentials in whatever machine you're using's credential manager and encrypt it. And then you can log in using a profile like this instead of having to log in using your URL, username, and password. So it's one of the ways and this gets stored on your system with the connection information to your web GIS and will work on Mac, Linux, and Windows. And so once you have access to this once you have the GIS class, you have access to all your site's properties and configuration settings. And it also, there are a number of manager classes implemented in the API as properties off this GIS class. So you can use, there's a user manager, a group manager, content manager, all accessible off this GIS class. And I'll talk a little bit about those more when I show you the script and we look at what was run with that script. So off this GIS class, there is an admin property, which is another module implemented as a property that gives you access to all the underlying architecture of your system. It's a little bit different what you have access to, whether you're using ArcGIS Online or whether you're using Enterprise, and some of the admin capabilities are different per system. But you have access to all these properties and the nuts and bolts of the system through this admin module. And just a couple highlights of some administration stuff you can do with, there is you can obtain a ton of information about your site history. You can define a time frame and then look at what's going on in your system over that time frame and determine what users are doing and look at the trends of what's going on in your site through this history endpoint that is accessible through this admin manual or module. And you can go ahead, you can graph stuff. You can then, once you have access to it, you can do all kinds of administrative tasks with that history. Another important aspect of this module, there's a credit manager class within the API that allows you to allocate credits to users based on, and you can set up criteria for however you want to determine how users get. Like one of the things I'd done was set up tags for users and allocated credits based on tags. So you can create scripts that work, then define all the credits that you want particular users to have. Another important capability of the admin module is accessing the logs. So off this admin module, you have access to the logs that are going to help you look into what kinds of issues may be going on with your server or with your site or with any of the services that are part of your Web GIS. You can update configuration settings. And again, you can set up timeframes for yourself and query these logs and get the different types of error information that you want to look at and try and troubleshoot your system if things are not performing the way you want them to. So, and metadata, you also have the capability to work with metadata and automate its creation and management through the admin module. And metadata is really important for your items when you're sharing them publicly in particular, so people know what they're getting. So working with metadata is something you can do with the admin module, as well as accessing all the federated servers that you've configured with your site. And so this admin module has a server manager class that is going to work with whatever servers you've federated, no matter what role the servers are playing in your system. You will be able to use the server manager to access them and then query the different things that are accessible on that server and configure some of the low-level issues on those machines. And it's going to, again, support all the different roles and allow you to do things like publishing directly from SD files and manage the logs and the data stores on each of your individual servers. Okay, so that's some of the admin capabilities. One of the things that I'm going to talk to now about is setting up users and groups, right? Automating the process of creating users and groups is something you can do through the Python API, and then subsequent to that, you can manage all kinds of information about the users. You can allocate licenses. I showed you can allocate credits. You can do all kinds of user management once you've got those created in the system. And the same is true of groups as well. Like you can create groups and manage the content and determine who's sharing and what you're sharing with groups and what users are members of groups, all in an automated fashion. And some of that is content is another thing that you can do a lot of automation with through the Python API. You can, of course, search for content that is in your portal, and you can visualize that content through Jupyter Notebooks and the map widget that's been constructed in the API. And you can also automate the creation and publishing of content. What this script that I'm going to walk through in just a minute is what we've done is follow the two-step process of adding a zip file item to the portal and then using the publish command to publish those as services, and then you will be free to share those as you will and configure those to work for your Web GIS. When you're creating content, you have access to setting all the properties that you want for the type of service to be published. So once you've got that up and running, you just add it, publish it, and now you've got content that you can update and manage, again, with the API and through a bunch of tasks or through a bunch of functions and classes that have been set up in there. You can not only create content, you can also delete it. And one of the issues with deleting content is the user management allows you to reassign content to users so that you can delete users and make sure that you're not losing any content when people leave your system. So you can do all the kinds of content management, user management through the API. Okay, and now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about life outside of Jupyter, right? So we talk a lot about Jupyter Notebooks and showing the API in that. But let's go and walk back. It looks like my scripts did indeed run, which is really great news. Okay, so let's go look at the results, right? So, okay, I had first showed you my empty, unpopulated organization, bam. Right now I've got look and feel, a banner, we are in Palm Springs, so let's pretend like we work for the city and we are attracting people here to work here. Right, I set up a featured group all through that script and published content and loaded it into the group that now is accessible through this page. Right, the groups page that was formerly empty is no longer empty. So I've got groups created and my script also, let's see if I've added any members to groups, and of course I select the group that I did not. So the script created these groups and it did add users to these groups as well. So you can manage all of this through scripting, right? So there we have all my users created and assigned to that particular group. And lastly, let's check and verify that here I've got all my users set up. And according to the user types and the roles that I've defined in the various CSV files that I looped through. So let's just walk through the script really quick, and then we'll take a look at the content, and I'll turn it over to these guys to run the show. So first thing I did was just set some variables to CSV files, and then use the admin manual, the admin module that I talked about to update the various graphic properties, like the textual description, the banner, the background, and I set the featured group that way as well. I set an extent for this organization to be in the location I am, and then I looped through a CSV file to create groups. I just open the CSV file, create an object from each row, and then populate the group from that row, and then do the same thing, the CSV file with users. And I'm able to read all that information from the CSV file. If we take a look at the CSV file, here's how it's set up, just with all the properties of each user. I'm using the role ID value for my custom roles, and the user type that I'm trying to assign to each one. Lastly, I'm just going to look at the script and show you how we're able to publish some content. Like what I did was I had zip files in a directory on my system. I just looped through each zip file, add it, define the properties of it, and then publish it with this command here. And then Bam, I have content. Well, not yet. Okay, now. All right, so here I have content. And what I did was I just extracted some data, city boundaries for Southern California, all the wind turbines in the United States, and then extracted just those in the desert, this Coachella Valley, those windmills and cities, and I created a web map all with my script. We're gonna look at the web map, and then my portion of the program is over. And I'm gonna turn it over to Bill. And so there is Riverside County, California with its corresponding wind turbines. Over to you, Bill.
All right, hold on, I'm getting there. What's your number? 3. Are we good? Yeah. All right, so my name is Bill Major. One thing I want to remind you to do is at the end, take a survey on your phone app. If you think this is a really great session, then please reference me, but any negative comments, please reference John and David. Also, if any of you have like really hard security questions, I see my good friend Michael here, so flock to him if you got good security questions. Always got to give him a hard time. Okay, so we're going to change. Thanks, John. That was really good. So, you know, he talked about how you can use the Python API from an administration perspective to start to set up users and groups and publish content, things that you definitely don't want to do 800 times over or anything like that. So we're just gonna now kind of, I'm gonna go over some content. I'm like this middle guy that, you know, I'm trying to like piece the two ends together a little bit of some content. So we'll switch gears and kind of jump around just a little bit. So the first thing is, I assume everyone saw the plenary. You know, we're all excited about hosted notebooks now. That is coming at 10.7, and I'm actually using a Jupyter hosted notebook here that I'm going to run to demonstrate my stuff. So I just wanted to talk about, you know, we have these coming. I will be within 10.7. It also comes populated with a lot of really cool samples. They can see my screen, right? Yeah. So samples that come with Notebook Server include a variety of administrative examples, so things that, you know, some concepts we're going over today that you can use these samples to then perhaps build upon, as well as a number of analytic samples as well. So use those as starting points. Some of these samples are sort of ready to run, so to speak, or might need just a little bit of tweaking. But look for that once your Notebook Server 10.7 is released. All right, so from an administrative perspective, how many of you work with portals today? And let's say, okay, that's great, so that's good. How many of you have more than, say, 1,000 users? Okay, so still, you know, maybe half of those that raised your hand. And how many of you have to deal with management of users coming and going and what to do with their content and all of that? So, you know, yeah, so a lot of people as well. So that's always a struggle. Like, people come in the company, they leave the company, and maybe they switch divisions, and then you have these, you know, these, I don't want to call them, well, these orphan user accounts that tend to exist over time. So one of the things you can do is use the Python API to help you manage those users a little bit. So this is just to show that I'm going to make a quick connection to my portal, and I'm going to simulate that I have a user called old user. All right, so this user has since left the company. Maybe I'm an IT guy and I got an email or something saying this guy left, or maybe you can set up an automated process where when someone is removed from Active Directory, then this triggers a Python script to actually go clean up some of the content in their portal. So I have this user called old user, and maybe the first thing you do is you want to disable that user account, right? The user left, and then let's just disable it. So to show you that this isn't total smoke and mirrors, so I'm going to come and let's just kind of look over here at our members list. So I have a number of users here, just a handful, and there's good old user. All right, so I'm going to run this, and I'm going to disable his account, or her account, his or her. And now if I refresh this, and sure enough, you can see that that user account has become disabled. Now, does that mean that their content is no longer accessible? No. What that simply means is that user can't log in or anything like that these days. All right, so that's not a very necessarily super exciting demo, but know that you can use techniques. Now, let's say after 30 days you want to like delete disabled members from your portal. Maybe you have some automated task or something like that. So let's go through and let's just say, hey, all right, let's clean up all of our disabled users at this point. Yeah, we have one disabled user. I know it's not more than 30 days based on that timestamp, but just kind of in your mind imagine that it is. And let's try to delete that user. Wow, I get a whole bunch of ugly stuff here. Well, if any of you have ever tried to delete a user, you know that you can't delete a user if they own content or even own or belong to groups. So you have to make some decisions about, well, what do I do with this user and its content? All right, so in this simple case, I'm going to use a Python API. I'm basically going to reassign all of their content to basically me in this concept, or at least the user that I'm connected as. So I'm going to go through and reassign some content, and then I should be able to delete that user. So now if I come back over here and refresh, sure enough, that user is now gone. And the one item that it did own, I forgot to show you that, but it was just a web map where this particular user was dreaming of a vacation to the Outer Banks or something. So who knows what they were doing with this web map. So anyway, just a quick run through of keep some of these administrative things in mind of what you can do to help manage users and their content if you're into disabling or deleting users. So it can help you with some of that. So the next thing I'm just going to show briefly, I actually had who came to my cloning workshop a little earlier today? One person, two or three, all right. Well, I'm not going to show anything super exciting and new related to that, but I wanted to just run over the cloning netbook, and I'm just going to quickly go through this. And of course, we're going to make all of this information available on GitHub, all of our Python notebooks after the conference as well. But basically, you can clone content, users, and groups between portals as well as between online and portal. So there's a number of ways that you can do that, but this particular one assumes that you have a portal connection to a source and a portal connection to a target portal. So you make your connections, and it assumes that this notebook here in this case has connectivity to both, so that it can talk to one, get information, and then push it to the next one. So maybe the first thing you want to do is go through and start to copy users. But before you do that, you need to make sure you copy over all of your custom roles that you may have and get those set up with the right privileges. So this is just showing you how you can copy over all your roles. So you loop through all the rules, make sure that it's not like the default viewer or the default data editor that exists at 10.7, and then you copy those roles over. Now that you got your custom roles in place, you can then start to loop through your users. So I have a number of users in my source portal, I have a couple in my target portal, and then the copy user method here, all that's really doing is basically saying, hey, for each user, give me all the information about that user, and then create a new user with all that same information. Okay? So you may be sitting there and thinking, all right, well, do you copy the passwords over? The answer is no. For built-in accounts in this scenario, if you're going to mask, clone, or copy users, for built-in accounts, you're going to have to give it an assigned password up front, and then users will have to go in and change their password. But what about web tier authenticated portals like IWA or PKI or LDAP? In those scenarios, we actually don't store the passwords within portal. So in those scenarios, you actually could copy users over, assign them to groups, and then the first time they come in, their account's already created and everything is ready to go. So copying web tier authenticated user accounts actually works out really well. So you loop through, you call the method, and you can copy users. Same thing with groups. You basically, from your source portal, you say, hey, what are all my groups? Get the information for them, and then in the target portal, you just create those groups with the same information. Now, just a couple more things I'm just going to talk about is then cloning the content. How do you move information over? So there is actually a method called clone items that I encourage you to look at. Clone items allows you to copy things like hosted feature services, web maps, web apps, and it even does things like it copies a web app over, it automatically will then copy the web map. It fixes all the web map IDs and all that kind of good stuff. And then if it has hosted feature services and things like that, it will then move those over as well. When it comes to map services and image services, it only copies those over by reference. It does not know how to get behind the scenes and bundle up all of that data currently. So I'm not going to really go over much more than that when it comes to cloning, but know that we have a method out there that can really help mass moving of data between different portals. All right, so that was cloning. Like I said, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. The next thing I'm going to simply do is now switch and just talk briefly about ArcGIS server administration with the Python, with the ArcGIS API for Python. So it's all about users and contents and groups, but there's this other thing you can't forget about, and that's ArcGIS server. That's sort of the brains behind the operation in terms of making all the services come to life. So I'm just going to review a few things that you can do with the admin. I think John mentioned it briefly of how you can use the admin manager off the GIS object to get access to your ArcGIS servers. So I'm going to quickly log in, make a connection here to another. Typing my password on the fly is dangerous. All right, look at that. All right, so one of the things you can do is use gis.admin.servers, and you can basically say, hey, what are all of the ArcGIS servers that are federated with my site? And it will give you a list of those. So in this particular case, I have a portal that has 3 ArcGIS servers registered. And I can even do the dangerous task on the fly in a demo of actually saying, hey, go validate all of those guys and make sure they validate fine. Well, sometimes validation can be a little iffy in terms of if it doesn't have good connectivity to your data store or something like that. But fortunately, everything works well. My servers validate, life is good. One of the things you may be saying, hey, this is cool, but how would I use this in my daily routine? Well, maybe you can automate or schedule Python scripts to run maybe once a day, once every 6 hours to say, hey, go to this portal, give me all the servers and validate. Make sure things are up and running. And if they're not, let me know. Maybe let me know via something David's going to talk about in a little bit, or send me an email or something like that. So just think about how you can use these techniques to help your administrative tasks. I know you can go in ArcGIS server or the admin API and look at the logs, but something you can do also, which John mentioned, is actually go query the logs for an ArcGIS server and let me know and let me view them within a pandas data frame. Or maybe I only want to go see the server logs and present them in a table or generate a port or something like that. So you have access to all of the logs. How many people wish there was a way to go through and restart all your services on your ArcGIS server site? So I had that one guy in the back, man, he couldn't get his hand up quick enough. All right, so this is just a quick little loop of, hey, you can use a Python API, just loop through this and turn them all off, right? Simple as that. I've been in that boat, and doing that manually like 400 times is not a lot of fun, I can tell you that. All right, so this is just an example. I'm looping through. I'm just dealing with the sample world city so I don't screw somebody else up. I just went through and said, hey, if it's the sample world cities, then I just stop it and then I start it back. So just an example of that. You can also go through and decide to enable or disable extensions. Like, hey, someone wants me to enable WMS on all of my map services so they can start using it with perhaps non-Esri open source clients or something like that. You can quickly go through and do things like that. Then finally, some of the other cool things you can do is you can also get access to the usage reports and statistics that ArcGIS server collects as part of its process. So here there are a number of reports in ArcGIS Server Manager. Come on, there we go. So by default, if you've ever been to Server Manager statistics, they have like a few little bar graphs and things that are like that. There's some built-in things like, hey, show me the max response times for the past 7 days or some things like that. So you can actually get access to that data through the Python API and then use things like matplotlib to quickly plot that here within a Python notebook, Jupyter notebook. So that's pretty cool. So that's some built-in reports, but you can also build custom reports. Like, hey, you know what? For the last month, go pull all the statistics of total requests for all the map services. And then it will quickly, you can get that information, pull it in, and then visualize it in a number of different ways or different Python tools. So I went through a whole bunch of stuff there real quick. I'm going to turn it over to David now, but hopefully I gave you, some tidbits of information of the Python API and how you can perhaps incorporate it into some of your administrative tasks. David?
Cool. Thanks, Bill. Everyone can hear me? Am I too loud? I've got a loud voice, so I don't want to amplify that with a microphone. Great, yeah, so Bill mentioned, thanks, a lot of things that I'm going to talk about. Here's just a brief agenda about what I'm going to talk through for my 15 minutes. I'm going to show some of that ArcGIS Notebook samples gallery. We're going to walk through some of them and show you the general workflow for the admin and content management samples that we ship with ArcGIS Notebooks. I'm also going to talk about running Python outside of notebooks, similar to what John said, but related to if you want to set up automation systems, using Jenkins or other systems like that, scheduling Python scripts to run. And finally, I'm going to talk more about webhooks and AWS Lambda. Some guy in the front beginning said that he was really into webhooks, so I'm going to focus more on that. So let's get rolling. All right. So Bill previously mentioned it, but at 10.7, ArcGIS Notebooks is an included server type and it adds this functionality to your portal. There's this new notebook tab up here, and just by clicking on this notebook, you are generated a brand new notebook item that's created as a portal item for you that you can then modify, import all your Python scripts, whatever else you want, and then when you're done, you can save it just as you normally would. I'm going to focus on the samples. So if you notice inside of this notebook editor, there's this samples tab. So we here at Esri for the notebook server created a lot of samples that we thought our customers would find useful. Since you're in the administration section, I'm going to show you the admin notebooks. So here's just a few of them. Deploying automatic notifications, managing inactive users, license expiration notifications, data stores, checking web maps for broken URLs, insecure items, item metadata, a lot of different things you can do there. There's also some content management notebooks. There's a bit of overlap between them. So creating a service report by that, secure items. Actually, I think I just went over those. So yeah, I'm going to walk through one which I have right here. So just to give you the workflow of what it looks like, you open a sample notebook. For the ones that need configuration, you make some changes to it. You include your own information to it, kind of custom tailor it to your portal, your information, and then you can save it to your content. And now I have my notebook all ready to go for this. So I'm just going to walk through it. I like live code demos so you can see exactly what's going on. So this is the sample notebook for checking for broken URLs in a web map. I walked through it and I modified the cells to set up with my SMTP server to send out email notifications like Bill referenced. It can be a very useful thing to, instead of you, let's say you're a JS admin and there are some web maps that are broken in a group. You can go in and qualitatively look at it and say, oh, this is the broken URL. Okay, let me go click, 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 look at the user email. Okay, click, 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 send an email. Hey, Shirley, your web map's broken. Or you can do all of it from code and save yourself the time. So I'm sending emails out by connecting to smtp.gmail. I have just an account that I set up there. It uses this built-in SMTP lib from Python. Sends an email to all the recipients. Just a nice, easy way of doing that. I can configure this to check all items in my portal or just a few groups. I'm going to do all items. Emailing the web app owner, also emailing yourself. That could be another cool way to configure it. So now that we've done all the configuration, we can get into the core logic of this notebook. So the essence of this notebook is this URL reachable, right? If you have a web map with 5 layers on it, you want to see if one of the URLs is broken. So from Python, the way I like to build code in a way that's a good practice is to build things by solving the smallest problem first, expanding out on it, expanding out even more, like layers of an onion. So the most basic part of this notebook is this URL reachable? I'm using the request library, which is an external third-party library that we include with Notebook Server. It's a very common library. But basically, this request.get will take in any URL, and it will physically ping that URL, similar to opening it in a web browser, and then we'll return this response of, was it there? Did the web server exist, and did it return a 200? Is it an OK response? If the web server is not there, or it returns a 404 or something else, it'll return false. So this just basic function will be called on all layers on our web map as we continue to move outward. This is another function then, which tests all URLs in the web map. So it calls the previous function of is reachable. I'm not seeing it here, but it's somewhere in here, I promise. There you go. If is URL reachable, add it to a reachable list. If it's not, add it to an unreachable list. So if you pass this function, any web map item, it will go through all layers and will check all of the layers for if all the URLs are reachable, and will return 2 lists, a list of reachable and a list of unreachable layers. So that's the next layer of the onion. This is a helper function to send out an email that looks really nice to our customers. You have a nice little icon here for, a big green check mark for reachable, a big red X for unreachable, formatting the string to make the item, to make the email look nice. This is another helper function that basically when you have an unreachable layer, what do you do with it? Are you sending an email out, or are you just writing a report, depending on how you configured this from above? And then finally, this is the helper function that integrates with that functionality of, am I going to check for all items in my organization, or just for the certain groups that I am wanting to check on? Now that we're here, we're at main. So main is what is called in this. And this main function basically pieces together everything that we've done before. So for all the items and the items that we've configured to check, for each web map, get the reachable and the unreachable layers. If there are unreachable layers, handle the unreachable. So notice how at this point I've written so many abstract functions that this main function is not even 12 lines long, and most of them are print statements. So it reads like human language. It reads like me telling you a problem about how to fix this. So I can define main, and now that everything is ready, oops, I think I must have skipped a cell as I was walking through it. So I'll just run through everything again. So while that's running, basically, it'll only take a second, but it's going to loop through every single item in our portal. As you can see, it just ran, checked for all these items as they were running, and then, oh, look, it found an unreachable item. So that called my SMTP service, which sent an email to me, the owner. I set up the item with the unreachable layer, and that, oh, this is no longer reachable. I'll show you the email. So web map ID contains unreachable URLs. You can view the web map here. Here are the reachable URLs, and here is the one that's unreachable. So maybe this referenced the service that is on an ArcGIS server that doesn't exist anymore, and so now it's gone. So that's one example of a sample notebook that you can configure and solve a problem with this. There are a few other samples that I might get to if I have time, but I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about webhooks, because I find that cool, and this guy here wanted to hear about it. So let's do it. Let me go back to here. So why should we do webhooks? We mentioned earlier in the plenary, and if you've been reading about it and following at this Dev Summit, it all comes down to how you want to solve problems. And in general, there are 2 ways that you can sort of set up a system of an automation system for administering your GIS. You can either do a polling system. So let's say I have a server running, like a Jenkins server, and I want to know when this item is updated. So every single 5 minutes, I run a Python script that will call gis.content.get on this item, Has this item been updated? No. OK, wait, 5 minutes. OK, let me check now. Item been updated? No. OK, let me check now. No, updated. And the server will literally do that for 24 hours a day, checking if the item's updated until finally it's updated, then it does something. There's that old saying that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So we need to treat our computers and automation systems well, because if they keep on doing the same thing over and over again, they'll get angry at us and randomly crash. So the better way of doing this is instead of keeping on having your server keep on polling enterprise, you just say, OK, wait, let's take a step back. I care about this item. I care about when this item gets updated. You, enterprise, tell me when this item is updated. Then I'll act upon it. And you can achieve that through webhooks. So it's that whole event-driven nature, that whole asynchronous nature of looking about how to solve automated problems that can really help you out in this scenario. So I'm going to show you, we're going to do a deep dive into all the webhook stuff. So let's do it. In any of your portals that you have set up, there is the REST API. So if my portal is available just to view in a web browser at /arcgis/home, you can access the REST API by going to /sharing/rest. You can log in as your portal admin, go to your home, community. Never mind, it's here. So you go to your org. So you go to your account, your org ID. Scroll all the way to the bottom to webhooks. So this is a new feature in 10.7, and this is an insight into your webhooks that you have configured right now. I gave a brief talk at the plenary this morning using AWS Lambda and webhooks, so you can see my webhook that was set up for that demo. So this is configured to run on all events on this, and it's to hit this endpoint. So let's go through how you would set up a webhook system with Zapier. So Indu earlier at plenary today talked about webhooks with Microsoft Flow. Let's show you how you actually go through setting up one. So Zapier is similar to Microsoft Flow. It's an automation platform. I'm going to show you how to make a new Zap, or that's just what they call it. And what you do is you click on this first step. So what is your trigger? Your trigger is a webhook. OK. I'm not doing polling, because polling is bad. I'm waiting for a new post, put, or get request on a Zapier URL, right? So I'm just going through this. I haven't written any code yet. This is saying, do you want to look at the whole payload or just a subset? We're going to look at the whole payload. You don't have to worry about that for now. But OK, I'm ready to go. So this Zapier has given me a webhook URL. So I'm just going to copy this and go back over to my admin API that I have. I'm going to create a webhook, add it to the payload URL. I'm going to call this Zapier example 3, we'll say. I've done 2 other ones. For what type of events that you can manage, this is all documented in the help docs on ArcGIS Enterprise Webhooks. So this is the syntax for send me everything. Send me all users being updated, all items being updated, all groups being updated, everything. If you just want to focus on items, this is send me all the item updates only. You want to just focus on groups, send me all the groups, users, etc. So I'm just going to do items. If you wanted to do a certain item, let's say you knew the hash of it, you would do that, and that would be your item that you only wanted to look at specifically. But I'm going to create this webhook for that. And as you can see, I now have the Zapier example 3 set up. So now whenever there is a change in any item on my portal, that Zapier endpoint that I talked to you about, this is going to get hit with the payload of what happened. And from there, I can configure all of that information. So OK, I did this. You move on. So now that's it. Keep moving. So this basically gets into 2 parts when you're doing this on Zapier. What's your trigger? What's your response? So in this, I've set up the whole trigger. So your Zap is lacking an action step. Let's add one now. So we can pick from the 1,000 apps that it has included. Just to give a few, there's Gmail, Google Sheets, Trello, Salesforce, different mails, sending out text messages, store it to a database, even run some code that you write in Zapier if you want to, do a little bit of some coding. I have one set up for Twitter where I like to do webhooks and misspell Mercator. So you can create a tweet on this webhook being triggered, and then this is my Twitter handle, go from there. So you're able to see how I haven't written any code. I've just been clicking through the REST API on the portal and opening up a new, this is a free account on Zapier, by the way, so you can definitely get this up and running on your 10.7 server right away. But I now have an asynchronous workflow where I can send out a tweet for every single webhook that's there. I can then, as you saw earlier today in the plenary, I can hook this up with some code on AWS Lambda or even through Zapier. Let me show you just that code that I showed you this morning. This is some Lambda code, but you can have that on this event being triggered. OK, now I can do some custom functionality. From this morning, it was I'm going to look up metadata associated with a portal item and attempt to fill in missing metadata. But you can do something with a feature. You download the feature, so on that change, you can look at some of the features on it, connect to external system, send out emails to people. Not to sound cliche, but I mean, when you have a webhook that is triggering in an asynchronous workflow and running a Python script, once you're in the Python realm, you can write code to do absolutely anything. So I think webhooks are really cool. I think looking at solving these problems, administrative problems from an asynchronous workflow is a lot better of a way to solve it than constantly polling. And I mean, the sky is the limit for what type of behavior you can implement with this. So that's all that I had planned. We wanted to save some time and open the floor for questions. I'm sure you all have a lot, but on behalf of us three, even if they throw shade at us, at each other, we thank you so very much for coming. Please take our survey. Here's that slide. And thank you all so much. So who has questions?
So those samples that are in 7.
Mm-hmm.
How can we get them now? Some of us have been burned multiple times by installing the first version of the new release. And so I could use those tomorrow.
So the question, in case everyone didn't hear it, is the samples that are coming in Notebook Server 10.7. Can you get the samples now?
The verdict is still out on that, which I think we're still...
I know that we provide a lot of samples, both in our doc as well as the GitHub sample site. They're not there?
No, yeah, I think we're still discussing internally whether...
Can we get your card afterwards? We might be able to... We'll talk about it. Okay. Yes, sir.
Just one direction from ArcGIS server to say flow or Zapier, or can you go the other direction?
So you can go the other direction. I think I'm still on the screen. I think actually Zapier allows integration with ArcGIS Online. I could be wrong. But yeah, no, you can. So for example, in the plenary that I did this morning, it did go both ways. A webhook triggered a Python function that ran. And this Python function that ran was using the ArcGIS API for Python. And it called an item.update. I forgot where I put it in here. But it was then, right here. So it was then able to go back into Portal and then make a call to then make an update to Portal. And then that update actually itself would trigger a webhook. So you can even get these workflows that, if you have something of, a user gets added, they then add it to a group, then a user gets added to a group, another webhook gets added. So you can get these whole chained events that you just design the one part and it all kind of filters out. But yeah, when you write from code, you can go both ways. There might even be a Zapier ArcGIS Online integration already for you, but if that answers your question.
But try not to get an infinite webhook loop going.
That's possible. It's like a microphone holding up to a speaker, you get that feedback loop. When I was demoing it, just internally trying to get it ready to go, I accidentally got into one of those loops and it sent me about like 50 emails a second, and I was just frantically trying to turn it off. So webhooks are fun, but they're dangerous. Not actually dangerous, that was a joke. Yeah, back in the back. I don't know specifically. You probably want to talk to the ArcGIS Online people about when/if that's happening. I know, is it? Yeah, I don't want to give you false information. I talked to the ArcGIS Online people.
They said yes at some point.
Okay. So this guy said that they said yes at some point. So it's a very non-binding answer.
Yes, sir.
Is it possible to use the ArcGIS API without using Jupyter Notebooks?
Absolutely.
Yep.
What John showed you here is he had PyCharm, just in IDE. The Python API is nothing more than a Python package you download into one of your Python environments. You can use it just like that. Yep.
Yeah, and if you use ArcGIS Pro, there's this executable that basically like runs the Python in your Pro that has ArcPy and the API in it, your whole Conda environment. So if you configure PyCharm or even other IDEs, like I think Andrew uses like PyWing or something, you just configure it with that interpreter, and then you're off running, or you just run it from the command line. Yeah.
Anything else? All right, thank y'all very much. Don't forget, we got Meet the Teams tonight in the Expo Hall.
5s on those surveys. All 5s.
Wow.